My brother and I are twins. Not identical but born at the same time. He's slightly older and shorter than me one-on-one. 1 minute and 1 inch. We got into culinary arts during college but got sick of working in other people's kitchens. That's when our best friend, we'll call him Steve, told us we should go into business together and start our own restaurant. So we did, putting Steve in charge of the finances while my brother and I focused on crafting the menu. We started with a food truck, competed in local competitions, and sold specials at just about every local event in town. Everything was going great, and when our parents saw how dedicated we were, they loaned us $15,000 so we could buy a restaurant. We chose one in a local hub that had great foot traffic both on the weekends and during lunch hours. But then about 6 months in, we started noticing our profits were dwindling despite the overwhelming increase of customers. We knew something was off because we were working harder than ever and even had to take on extra staff just to keep up. Finally, my brother went to Steve and asked, "What gives? Our checks are smaller than usual, but I know we're taking in more money than ever before." Steve assured him it was the cost of materials and extra help that was offsetting our profits. But if we stick with it, eventually it'll even out. It made sense at the time, so we kept working and inventing new dishes. But no matter how popular they were, the profits kept eating away. We started cutting costs wherever we could, but this did little to solve the problem. My brother, growing increasingly suspicious of Steve, demanded to see the books. But when Steve refused to show it to him, I too became suspicious. We got into a huge fight over who had true ownership of the restaurant and had the right to do what. In the end, my brother punched Steve. All I remember was seeing Steve's white socks fly in the air as he landed on the table. At that point, I had to hold my brother back, but the damage had been done. In a rage, my brother threatened to sue Steve, press charges against him, and kill him all in the same breath. At that point, I was actually feeling embarrassed despite how pissed I was at Steve, and forced my brother to just go home. We didn't talk to each other for another 3 months. We still worked at the restaurant but switched to just appearing for the evening shifts as Steve usually came during the day. I spoke to a lawyer who said we could buy him out. So we decided to have it out with Steve at the end of the week and tell him he was out. But when we got to work, no one was there. Even worse, none of the crew had cleaned the kitchens from the night before. All the food had been left out. Our crew vanished and the evening crowd was set to start coming within an hour. Switching our sign to close, we called our parents, who came over right away to help clean up. Meanwhile, I texted everyone under our staff to ask where they were, but no one answered. Finally, one waiter responded after several hours. According to him, Steve came in that morning and told them all they were fired and that my brother and I wanted to sell the business. I told him that's ridiculous, we're here at the restaurant now and to come back to work. But my waiter responded, "I'd like to, but Steve already told us the restaurant is under new management. You may want to sort this out with Steve." Pissed, we rushed to the bank to salvage the restaurant fund, but we were too late. There was only $50 left in our joint business account. I called Steve, but every call went directly to voicemail. Finally, I drove to Steve's house, but it was empty too. Speaking to another lawyer and the police, they said we had a solid case against Steve, but only if we could find him. Panicked and with no money, we were being hit left and right with late fees on top of bills for a restaurant we no longer owned. Apparently, Steve stopped paying the bills early. With no choice, we were forced to sell everything we had and move back in with our parents. We needed money for a lawyer and money to start a new restaurant. Still, every day all my brother could talk about was Steve and all the things he was gonna do to him once he got his hands on him. After a while, I just wanted to move on with my life. Then one day, my dad started screaming from the living room. We came running in to ask him what was the matter. When he showed us the cover of a cooking magazine I'd asked for, there, grinning on the cover amidst 50 checkered photographs, was Steve. The cover reading Soho's 50 Up and Coming Chefs. Taking the magazine, I flipped to his portion of the article. There he was at the top of the page, grinning over a pot of a very familiar lobster special my brother and I created. The caption read, "Best of Soho." Fireworks went off in my head as my brother ranted and read the article aloud. Steve was in New York with our money and making a name for himself in the culinary world with our recipes. My dad and I made contact and he immediately, sensing what I was thinking, keyed in a few quick codes on his cell and my phone buzzed. He'd auto-sent me $5,000 with a note captioned, "Get that bastard. There was only one way to get back at a man like Steve. Take everything he had and leave him flailing in the wind." I let my brother rant and scream as I went to my room and packed a bag. After he realized no one was listening, my brother came in my room. "Where you going?" "New York." Suddenly, all the anger drained out of my brother's face. "To do what?" I gave him a look that didn't need a response. "I'm going to," he said quickly. "You're too hot-headed." I said, "No, I'm not." He argued, "You'll blow my cover." "No, I'll cover you, whatever it is. I've got your back," he said. I knew he wouldn't let me go alone. With a sigh, I said, "Pack a bag." His eyes grew wide with shock and excitement, and he ran to his room to pack. The second he was gone, I got in my car and left for the airport. The last thing I saw in the rear view was my brother running out the house, begging me to wait for him. So I wasn't too surprised when a pair of glaring eyes sat next to me at the airport gate. I calmly read my magazine, pausing only to give him a look that told him the second he messed up, he was out. My brother seemed to get the message. While pissed, he stayed cool rather than blowing his lid as usual. About 4 hours into the flight, my brother, who somehow managed to book a seat next to me, asked, "So what's the plan?" "I don't have one yet," I said. "So we fly to New York and just ask for our money back." No, we listen and we learn. When we got to New York, it wasn't too difficult finding Steve's restaurant, a small bistro that was overcrowded and overwhelmed. We could tell by the 2-hour wait to sit, followed by the hour-and-a-half wait to eat, that Steve wasn't over his head. We each ordered one of our specials and grinned. He missed a smoked pepper. I said, "Mine is off. It's kinda sour, rather than sweet and tangy." My brother grinned. Smiling, we ordered more food. He completely screwed our menu and was skating by on the edges of his teeth. According to the article, he was coming up with new specials every week, adding to the restaurant's popularity. But a quick chat with the waiter told us he hadn't come up with anything new in over a month, opting instead to recycle old recipes. He'd run through our entire library of recipes, which meant he was already at his boiling point. My brother and I delighted in all the different ways he could go bust as we left. Then, the ultimate revenge struck me. A small restaurant sat with just a few customers across the street. We headed straight for it, ordered his lackluster specials, and asked to speak to whoever was in charge. The man braced himself for a plethora of complaints when I said, "How'd you like to throw that place out of business?" I nodded to Steve's restaurant. The man's eyes widened. "How?" he asked. "We can cook every dish on his menu, only better." The man looked hungry with intrigue, then said, "Prove it." Sending a spy across the street to order a special, my brother and I got to work, cooking a perfect replica of the dish, only with our signature touch and all the right ingredients. With one taste, we were hired and went to work. We not only cooked everything on his menu, rebranded with different names to the dishes, but we offered more, creating 3 specials every week. Customers growing frustrated with the long wait for the same food as Steve started shifting our way. Our goal was to steal his entire business and bury him. But as we gained in popularity, new specials emerged from Steve's place. Specials that were exact replicas of ours. We had to work fast. We weren't destroying Steve's business, but keeping it on life support. Then one day we got a call up front from a flashy customer who asked to meet the head chefs. Assuming it was some socialite or critic, we switched our aprons and headed out. It was Steve. The fury that hit me from the pit of my stomach was only quenched by my need to keep my brother calm as he reached for his spatula. I held out my hand to him. "Let me do the talking," I said. Steve sat in his booth, looking as smug as ever. He calmly sipped his lemon water as he leaned back, an irritatingly calm smile on his face. But I could see the fire in his eyes. He was angry. Angry that we were thriving, angry that his so-called genius wasn't winning anymore. Then his brow raised as he saw us, and his smile widened, giving us a tiny inaudible applaud as we approached his table. "I knew it. I knew it was you too," he said. "How'd you guess?" I said, keeping my tone calm even though I could see my brother's grip on the spatula tighten. "From the dishes I've been sampling from your restaurant. They've got your touch all over them. This is quite the operation you've got here," he said smoothly, glancing around. "Looks like business is comfortable. But if you wanted to come to New York, why didn't you come to me?" "Couldn't find you," I said, "since you took our money and ran." "Your money? Last I checked, I handled the money, and you guys were just the cooks. You were never businessmen, and still just a couple of amateurs." My brother slammed his spatula down on the counter. "What do you want, Steve?" Now, Steve said, holding up his hands as if to calm him. "No need for the hostility. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. You know, reminisce about old times." I tilted my head. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old notebook we'd kept since the beginning, our brainstorming journal, filled with ideas and experiments. Steve's eyes locked onto it. Too bad you missed the most vital thing when you stole from us, I said, holding up the notebook. This is where the real magic happens, I said, slamming the book down on the table in front of him. I leaned in and whispered, "It was never you, Steve. And it never will be." Steve's eyes struggled to maintain eye contact with me as his fingers crawled towards the book on the table, his lips practically drooling for it. Just as his stubby little digits were in reach of the book, I gently glided it away and tucked it back into my pocket. Steve's expression hardened for a split second before the smug mask returned. "And on that note, I guess I'll have the special," Steve said. "We're fresh out of specials for assholes," I said, walking away. "Enjoy your water," my brother added, joining me in the kitchen. My brother was furious the rest of the day, sawing that chicken meat in bone as if his life depended on it. I stayed quiet as I cooked, but by the end of the night, he couldn't take my silence anymore. "What was the point of that?" he snapped. "Everything," I said, sitting down and scribbling into my notebook. "So that's it. We come down here to have a few words and just continue to make specials. Show him up for a week or two, until he does the same thing. No, if my theory's correct, he's gonna steal our notebook, which is why I'm leaving him a very special recipe inside." My brother's frown softened, and he leaned over my shoulder, and a smirk spread slowly on his face. "The forbidden combo," he said. I said slowly, adding the finishing touches into my ultimate revenge dish. If I was right, Steve would find a way to steal our notebook and cook his next special using the forbidden combo. "Think he'll fall for it?" my brother asked. "He's a businessman, not a chef," I said, placing the book in its usual spot in our office. For a week I left the door unlocked, and sure enough, a week later, Steve's big debut came crashing down in spectacular fashion. His smugness was in full effect as he unveiled his new signature dish, the cucumber soufflé deluxe, a culinary abomination. Curious customers flocked to his restaurant with excitement, but the moment they tasted it, the disaster was unavoidable. The bland, watery soufflé was met with horrified expressions, gags, and shouts of outrage. Customers stormed out of his restaurant in droves, their complaints echoing through the night. "Was this a punishment?" one man asked. Meanwhile, we debuted our actual special, crispy herb-crusted chicken with lemon aioli. The line stretched down the block, the buzz inside was electric, and the glowing reviews poured in. Later that night, after closing up shop, we peeked across the street. Steve was sitting alone in his empty restaurant, furiously flipping through the notebook. The confused look on his face was priceless. We'd had the book since high school. I kept it for sentimental reasons. But every single page was filled with absurd, inedible recipes, from marshmallow stew to sardine parfait to spicy peanut jello. Every recipe in there was hot garbage. My brother was doubled over with laughter. "Do you think he's figured it out yet?" he asked between gasps. "I think we broke him," I chuckled, leaning back against the counter. Our laughter and cheers inside our restaurant could probably be heard for miles, and we were certain the noise gave our prank away, but it didn't. Steve started releasing every dish we cooked up in that book, searching for his new big hit. His reputation got so bad that people stopped coming to his restaurant. Even the regulars didn't bother anymore, with only a few unsuspecting newbies eating in disappointment. In the end, Steve went insane, running through cooks and servers like water as his profits dwindled. Till one day, a quiet for sale sign went up. We'd been so preoccupied with outpacing Steve, we hadn't realized how much money we saved. But the moment we checked our books, we rushed an offer for the restaurant, working out a partnership with our new boss. We now own 2 New York restaurants, while Steve, we heard, went back to a 9-to-5, working for a boss he hates.